Hello, you're on Ruslan Belov's channel, and we are starting our daily analysis of the situation on the Ukrainian front. Do you know what the President of Finland, Stubb, said yesterday? Apparently, if you didn't know, Russia is suffering defeats and losing on all fronts of the battlefield. Just like that. And Ukraine is winning. Well, let's take a look at how exactly Ukraine is winning and how the Russian army is supposedly losing. Let's move on to the frontline overview. Friends, I kindly ask for a moment of your attention. As usual, I want to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. If you've watched my videos more than once and still haven't subscribed, please do. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed. Now let's continue. So friends, just yesterday we were saying that things on the front were relatively quiet. But in the past 24 hours, there have been significant advances in several areas. In one day alone, the Russian army took control of more than 30 square kilometers. But let's go in order, and today we'll start with the Dnipropetrovsk region. This is the area under the responsibility of the Vostok East Group, and the Vostok Group is like a steamroller that the armed forces of Ukraine simply cannot stop. In the past 24 hours, there were advances in two areas within the Dnipropetrovsk region. First, as we discussed yesterday, battles continued in Sosnivka, where Ukrainian forces were putting up fierce resistance trying to delay the Russian army. Well, that's over now. The fighting has ended, and the village has come under full Russian control. Russian soldiers have shown flags from various parts of the village. That makes Sosnivka the 10th village in Dnipropetrovsk region taken by Russian forces. So very soon, the number of villages taken in Dnipropetrovsk will equal that of the Sumy region. And I'm more than confident that the number will eventually exceed it, because in Sumy, Russian forces are mostly holding positions without much movement, whereas here, they're pushing forward confidently, and it looks like the Ukrainian army doesn't have the strength to stop them. What does the loss of Sosnivka mean for the armed forces of Ukraine? It's not just the loss of another village, it means that the Ukrainian troops will now start collapsing in this area quickly. After Sosnivka, there's basically nothing for them to hold on to until Alexeyevka. What's the distance? Let's measure it. More than 7 kilometers if the advance goes strictly westward, but most likely the movement will go not only toward Alexeyevka, but also toward Orestopol. That distance is shorter, just 3 kilometers. In any case, the AFU are being forced to retreat. Furthermore, advancing toward both Alexeyevka and Orestopol will effectively mean encircling Velikomikhaylovka from the south. And that's very serious, especially considering that, according to local reports, Russian forces are now entering the forest in front of Velikomikhaylovka. It's not yet clear how large their presence is. Maybe it's still just reconnaissance or small sabotage groups. But they've started probing, because that forest is key, to taking Velikomikhaylovka. It's where forces can gather and then launch pressure on the village. If that forest is secured, Velikomikhaylovka will definitely fall under Russian control. So there's serious trouble brewing for the AFU, and not just here. There was another axis of advance in Dnipropetrovsk region. Look over here. This is the Pokrovske-Huliai-Pol highway, which is the main objective of the current push. From current positions, it's about 19 kilometers away. A few more kilometers, and Russian FPV drones will be within striking range. Ukrainian military analysts are already sounding the alarm, saying there's a lot of equipment on this highway. And soon, all that equipment will start burning. So we have to understand that any advance here will inevitably affect the front further south, in Zaporizhzhia, at least on the Huliai-Pol sector. Once Russian forces bring this highway under fire control, the front will begin to move. Back to Dnipropetrovsk, there was also progress on another section, as I've already told you, from the village of Zaporizhzhia to Novonikolaivka. The advance here was 2.5 kilometers, and they reached and secured the eastern part of Novonikolaivka. As you can see on the map, this happened at the junction of two regions, Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia, so this advance occurred across both. Again, the goal is the same: control of the highway and the strategic overhang over the Huliai-Pol front. Essentially a balcony that could collapse everything here at any moment. So we're watching closely, but for now, the advances in Dnipropetrovsk are indeed impressive. The pace is solid, Moving on, there was also progress in the Konstantinivka direction, again in two areas. First, Russian forces advanced 2.5 kilometers from Shcherbinivka and took control of Dnipropetrovsk. Yes, reports of this came 2 weeks ago, at the end of August, but only now have visuals confirmed the advance. So now we can say with certainty the village is under Russian control. Fighting is now ongoing for the neighboring village of Pleshchivka. I've mentioned in earlier videos that this area, right in front of Konstantinivka, has the last major defensive stronghold consisting of two connected villages, Pleshchivka and Ivanopilia. And Ivanopilia is quite a sizable village. Once those are taken, there are no more major defensive lines from the east or south. Also in the Konstantinivka direction, they've finally managed to do something that's long been anticipated, closing the pocket between Predtekine and Oleksandro-Shultin. Not completely yet, but most of it. The advance here was nearly 5.5 kilometers, and the total area cleared was 18 square kilometers. What remains now is to straighten the line a bit more. And that's it. There'll be a solid front line to move toward the city. As for Konstantinivka itself, it's hard to talk about future prospects. Many expected the battles for the city to begin this summer, then shifted the timeline to September, but it's now clear they won't start in September either. Personally, I don't think there will be a full-scale assault on the city at all. It's too long, too complicated, and too costly. It would require enormous resources to storm such a large city. Just look at the map and see how huge the industrial zone is. No, the army will bypass it, along this route, or maybe this one. That's why this massive encirclement has been forming, and not much remains to close it completely. From Rusin Yar, they need to reach either Rysky or Mykolapilia, or both, and from Chasiv Yar to Vorolyubivka, and then either turn or continue toward Druzhkivka. In any case, the goal is the same: bring the last supply artery, and the main one, under full fire control and then physical control. That's it. No need to storm the city. The AFU will either withdraw or be blocked inside. That's the outlook. Let's continue. There was also an advance in the Siversk direction, about 1 kilometer south of the village of Novoselivka, expanding the control zone there. For now, this is nothing major, just a tactical improvement of positions. But soon the AFU will face serious trouble here too, especially given the reports from the northern section, specifically from the Serebryansky forest, where Russian forces are applying heavy pressure and the AFU is retreating. Very soon, fighting will begin for Yampol and Dronivka. Taking Dronivka will mean a complete blockade of Siversk from the north and a threat from the west. That will be the endgame. But all of this must be nonsense. After all, the President of Finland said yesterday that Russia is suffering defeats on all fronts. That's that. You didn't know that, right? Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces have taken more than 32 square kilometers of territory. But that's a defeat and a failure, according to him. And Ukraine is winning, according to the President of Finland. Now let's move on to the Orichiv direction. In the Orichiv direction, intense combat operations are ongoing near the settlements of Stepnohersk, Malotokmachka, and Bilohiria. Let's start with Stepnohersk. As you know, Russian forces took control of a residential area here yesterday and the day before. Today, additional confirmation has come in that this section of the battlefield is now fully under Russian control. In the Plavny area, Russian forces advanced by 1 kilometers, and reports indicate they have taken control of a key road junction and secured the southern outskirts of Stepnohersk. Once video materials confirming the expanded zone of control are released, the map will be updated accordingly. It's worth noting that the Ukrainian armed forces have fortified lines in this area, marked in yellow, and the Russians are expected to advance in that direction. There's also a line of defense within Stepnohersk itself, but it's not currently shown on maps because it consists mainly of private homes and high-rise buildings. These high-rises are mostly located in the central part of the settlement. Reports also confirm that Ukrainian positions in Stepnohersk have been attacked by FPV drones. But this is not surprising. Both Ukrainian and Russian FPV drones are active along the entire front line. Now let's move to Malotokmachka. Ukrainian forces attempted a counterattack here. A storm group carried out an assault on Russian positions, but failed to achieve any significant results and was forced to retreat, due to the massive number of Russian FPV drone teams operating in the area. Let me remind you that the current war is largely fought with FPV drones. For those who keep referencing WFC in the comments, this is a completely different war with very different troop numbers and technology on both sides. As for Russian advances, there were no new gains recorded in this sector. Russian forces had previously secured the eastern outskirts of the village but haven't advanced further, possibly because they don't intend to. So they are holding the line there while applying pressure elsewhere. There are also reports of Ukrainian positions north of Bilohirya being attacked. Right here at this point. In the Pokrovsky direction, Russian forces are expanding their zone of control near the village of Moravka. Yesterday, we mentioned that most of Moravka had come under Russian control. In the next day or so, we expect video footage confirming this, most likely showing the Russian flag being raised. Today, video materials also came in from the settlement of Udakne. As you know, for several weeks there have been reports that Russian forces had taken most of Udakne, pushing Ukrainian forces north of the village. Today's footage confirms expanded Russian control west of Udakne. Russian troops raised the Russian flag, and all territory marked in red has now come under full Russian control. The advance here is up to 1 km. In another part of Udakne, clearing operations are likely ongoing, and within the next 2 to 3 days, new video evidence may come in, at which point the map will be updated. As for Myrnohrad, you may recall earlier reports stating that Russian forces were expanding their zone of control, and some Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups, DRGs, had entered the southern part of Myrnohrad. Today, new information suggests positional fighting is occurring on the northern outskirts of Myrnohrad. Some sources claim that assault operations are underway, but that information is likely inaccurate. Main Russian forces have been redirected elsewhere. That's all for the frontline situation for now. Let's take a look at the political field. Another massive missile and drone strike was launched against Ukraine. The attack affected multiple regions: Kiev and Kiev Oblast, Vinnytsia, Lviv, Zhytomyr, Volyn, Chernihiv, Rivne, and Odessa regions. There were explosions reported in Lviv, with authorities confirming a drone raid. In Vinnytsia, industrial facilities were struck. Eyewitnesses recorded massive fires and smoke columns. Similar attacks on industrial enterprises in Zhytomyr region were also reported. As for the so-called Geran drone attacks over Poland, in reference to the previous incident when several drones entered Polish airspace, there has been a response from both Polish and Ukrainian sides. Ukrainian social media have been calling Polish allies punching bags and are demanding that Poland directly engage in conflict with Russia. But the Poles are holding back, for now. After the night incident, Poland simply announced the call-up of reservists, apparently for unscheduled exercises. All this is happening against the backdrop of Israel's missile strike on Qatar, for which Tel Aviv has received no serious backlash, not from Poland, not from anyone except Qatar itself. A very revealing contrast. Meanwhile, Western Ukraine is quite literally burning, and not just metaphorically on social media. There are attempts to drag others into the war. A Polish politician accused Kiev of provocations ahead of the Zapad military exercises. Krzysztof Figura, a representative from the campaign headquarters of presidential candidate Grzegorz Michał Braun, addressed PM Donald Tusk with a sharp question. Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations on your courage. You're informing NATO about a situation that you can't even explain to your own citizens. The Zapad exercises are coming. The Ukrainians are preparing another provocation, like in Przevodov, to drag us into someone else's war. Robert Fico also commented. He said, "We must determine whose drones these were and whether it was deliberate." The Prime Minister of Slovakia called for a clear investigation into who controlled the drones that entered Poland and whether the incident was intentional. He connected this with the issue of arms deliveries to Kiev. Fico stated that handing over air defense systems to Ukraine without replacements was military sabotage against Slovakia. He emphasized that instead of acknowledging past mistakes, the opposition just screams in the media like madmen, continuing to push the country into crisis. Back in Ukraine, Bankova, the president's office, is suffering one failure after another. Western military and financial aid is dwindling from summit to summit. Where billions used to be given, now they're barely scraping together millions. Another Ramstein meeting ended in failure. Former PM and current Defense Minister Shmyhal requested at least 10 more Patriot systems. No one is giving them. There simply aren't any left to give. They've all been handed out. They're now requesting $6 billion for the production of drones, interceptors, FPVs, and attack drones. It's essentially an attempt to bribe donors, as this looks like a classic corruption case. Ukraine doesn't even have its own drones. Most are Chinese modifications. And most importantly, the funding for the 2026 war effort remains unresolved. Shmyhal is requesting $60 billion from partner countries' budgets to defend Europe and Ukraine. They're also requesting air defense missiles, as the AFU is facing a critical shortage. But the West doesn't have any in stock. This will be a problem. Meanwhile, there are talks of tightening sanctions and confiscating frozen Russian assets. But that's just media hype for headlines. Right now, Ukraine is facing a budget deficit of 300 billion hryvnias for 2025, and there's nowhere to get that money. Germany, in contrast, allocated just $300 million, barely enough to soften the blow. The situation is grim. Financial Times reports on a very troubling trend. Ukraine risks running out of air defense munitions due to slowed US deliveries. Disruptions in supply are already being observed. This is due to the Pentagon's internal audit, which resulted in cutbacks and a switch to a more frugal mode. Officially, White House spokespeople deny this, claiming the US is meeting Kyiv's needs. But the reality is obvious. A significant portion of interceptors isn't reaching Ukraine. The EU's replacement program for US arms deliveries has started, but it's only partially functioning and does not cover the shortfall, while Kyiv's stockpiles are rapidly depleting. A new wave of Russian strikes is expected soon, including those targeting the energy infrastructure. This brings the question of political responsibility into sharp focus. Zelensky knows full well that the previous levels of aid will not return. The US and EU are no longer willing to endlessly supply weapons. With Western resources running dry and Ukraine's own reserves exhausted, Zelensky's refusal to seek peace is looking increasingly cynical. His choice seems to be to avoid peace in order to stay in power. But the situation for Kyiv is deteriorating rapidly, and it will only get worse.